Hey there, I'm Bobby Hendry and I'm an expert by experience on the Fostering Lifelong Connections study, and I'm also the writer and creator of this book here, My Family Time is Mine, a resource made for kids and teens in the out-of-home care system. I grew up in the out-of-home care system, so I know the challenges that kids in the system now face, and I found family time to be one of the most challenging aspects of my care experience, which is why I was really passionate about creating this book. I remember as a kid, anytime I met someone with a care experience, I instantly trusted them more. I knew they got it. And I wanted kids that read this book to know that I understand the challenges that they face. The main goal for this book was to empower kids with knowledge about their rights, about how to communicate, about their feelings, about how to understand them better. To basically put all the things that we talked about in the Fostering Lifelong Connections Zoom meetings into something tangible that kids could hold. I'd like to say that it took a lot of hard work, but to be honest, it really didn't. I mean, it took a bit of hard work, but I feel like once I sat down in front of my computer, all the things I wish I knew as a scared little kid just fell out of my brain and neatly into chapters. Speaking of chapters, I want to talk you through what is included in this book. There are 7. Chapter 1 is called You Have the Right to Enjoy Time with Your Family. This chapter goes over all the rights kids have when it comes to family time. Their rights about safety, about putting up boundaries, their right to connect with their culture and people that mean a lot to them. But quite importantly, it encourages speaking out about negative or unsafe things that happen at family time. Chapter 2 is It's Okay to Not Feel Okay Before or After Family Time. And this chapter really goes into the crux of the issues that kids face when it comes to family time, and that's managing their emotions. In this chapter, I've included a step-by-step guide to regulation so kids can self-regulate their own emotions. I've also included a bit of a chart on words that can better explain happy, sad, worried, surprised, and angry emotions. It's hard for kids to communicate their feelings when they don't know the right word to explain it, so it's a bit of a dictionary list for kids to look back on. I also go quite in depth into the feeling of anger, that it's an understandable feeling, and that it can be controlled and managed a bit better. I also touch on how great it can be to come up with a routine for before and after family time. Some kids do really well when they have things to distract them, like watching a movie or just having the space to spend time on their own in the quiet. So I encourage kids to talk to their caseworker and carers about things that they might want to implement before or after family time to help them regulate their emotions. Our brains are behind everything we feel. Now, this chapter goes into really what we talked about the most in our Expert by Experience Zoom meetings, and that's trauma-informed care. The stress responses, fight, flight, freeze, and the new fella fawn. We go into what each of those responses means, how they can be managed, and also we've included Spotify playlists that kids can put on when they're feeling each of the stress responses. Chapter 4 is Knowing How to Communicate Effectively Can Be a Big Help. As a kid, I felt like I often had to communicate above my means, above my age. I was communicating with carers, caseworkers, courts, and lawyers. So in this chapter, I want to explain that communication doesn't always go smoothly and that everyone has a responsibility when it comes to communicating effectively. I go over some tips on how kids can be better listeners and how they can be better communicators, and then I go into what I think is the most crucial part of effective communication, and that's empathy, putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Chapter 5 is The People and Adults Around You Have Thoughts and Feelings Too. In this chapter, I go into the role that adults play in the lives of kids and how, ultimately, they are doing their best. I also go into how, despite doing their best, they sometimes get it wrong, and that any negative behaviour from them is no one else's responsibility but theirs. I know as a kid, I often felt the impact of other people's actions and took it as my responsibility. So in here, I go over some behaviours that kids might see from the adults in their life and how they are not responsible for them, but better ways that they can look at it. Chapter 6 is It Really Is Okay to Make Mistakes. Nobody is perfect. In this chapter, I go over how mistakes are a part of life, they're a part of being human, and that there's a great opportunity to learn from them. I'm a big fan of the growth mindset, so I go into that a lot here. I also talk about how to limit negative self-talk, on how kids can be better friends to others as well as themselves, and I also go over how to apologise and why it's important to apologise when our mistakes impact others. Chapter 7 is You Can and Will Get Through the Hard Times. In this chapter, I wanted to give kids affirmations that they could tell themselves whenever they needed it, whenever they needed to remind themselves that they are strong and resilient. I also go into what resilience is and celebrate the kids for being resilient, for getting through the hard times. I also include how the future is unwritten, and despite there being a lot of things out of their control, there's still a lot of things in the control of these kids. That's their future, their attitude, and their goals. I've absolutely loved the opportunity I've had to use my experience on this study and in creating this resource for kids that I hope will help them feel a little less alone and a lot more in control in a childhood that I know all too well can feel lonely and helpless.